Today at the National Press Club, Minister for Government Services and the NDIS, Bill Shorten. Coming to government, Labor promised to improve Australians' experiences accessing essential payments. With the world more online than ever, data protection is a key concern. But how will the government balance that with easy access to essential services? Bill Shorten with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia for today's Westpac address. My name is David Crowe and I'm the Chief Political Correspondent at the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, and also a Director here at the club. Our guest today is Bill Shorten, the Minister for Government Services and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. He's well known to Australians as a senior Cabinet Minister and a former leader of the Labor Party, and as a Member of Parliament who championed the NDIS from the moment he was named the Parliamentary Secretary for Disabilities back in 2007, a long experience in this sector. The subject today is the future of government services in Australia, and we already have an early sign of this subject matter. Mr Shorten has signalled plans for what is being called a trust exchange, a way for people to verify their identity at places like MyGov, used by millions of Australians. Meanwhile, there's also the pressing issue of reform to the NDIS to bring spending under control, and that's something that's before the Parliament right now. Certainly, I think, going to be the subject of some of the questions. So there is a lot to hear about and a lot to ask about. Please welcome Bill Shorten to the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my respects to Elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today. It's good to be at the National Press Club. For those of you interested, I think it's my 19th address in 22 years. And this venue actually takes its place amongst, I think, some of the most storied press clubs of the world. It can't boast of tales of Buffalo Bill Cody or of Lauren Bacall sitting atop a piano being played by Harry Truman, as the Washington chapter can. But I think the National Press Club in Canberra has come to be known for the quality of speakers, pretty much, and crucially the national important conversations that it's launched. Today I'd like to launch another. Today I would like to discuss how our nation becomes the world leader in government service delivery and how we employ technology to achieve that goal. How we leverage three things that we're good at when it comes to digital: adoption, inclusion and innovation, to ensure that we put our citizens first and we deliver for all Australians in much the same way as our great social universal institutions, Medicare, superannuation, the minimum wage and the NDIS. And I will share with you an exciting step forward for Australia's digital infrastructure. But I'd actually like to take a moment first to acknowledge David Hazelhurst, who now leads Service Australia, and Ray Griggs, Secretary of the Department of Social Security, for being here today. I'm fortunate to have an excellent working relationship with both David and Ray, and I'm grateful for their frank and fearless advice, although I'm thinking there right now, well, if only he'd take it. But I do think I can speak for us and my other senior public servants who are here that we value a contest of ideas and its ability to create robust plans focused on people. In 2022, I took carriage of two portfolios of very public and significant problems. The derailed NDIS has been well documented, as has my ongoing efforts and that of the disability community and the NDI to get it back on track. I'm going to take it as read that you know that that's helped keeping me up at night on the NDIS front. But today is about the other side of my portfolio. I'd like to share with you a 5-year perspective from my time as Shadow Minister for Government Services and now as Minister. Now, I came to this role well versed in the misery that was robo-debt. I saw its architects and its enablers. In 2019, I helped organise the class action against this immoral and illegal scheme. And in opposition, it held the coalition's feet to the flame as they ignored external and agency legal advice about unlawfulness. One of my first tasks from the Prime Minister, along with the Attorney-General and the Minister for Social Services, was to establish the Royal Commission into robo-debt, because it had a pathology at its heart that needed to be cured, a sickness that unfortunately two people here today know all too well. I'd like to acknowledge Jenny Miller and Kath Madrick. Their sons Reece and Jared took their lives after receiving robo-debt notices. Reece and Jared, Kath and Jenny, and 430,000 other Australians were served unlawful debt notices. This should be a constant reminder to all of us who work in public policy and public service that the decisions we make have consequences. We cannot and frankly must not forget robo-debt because, as the saying goes, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. The Albanese government's response to the Royal Commission is about putting the human back into human services and inviting civil society groups to be part of the conversation on the delivery of government services. This all coalesces around one goal of making it impossible for robo-debt to ever happen again. Now, I know that the fact that robo-debt is associated with Service Australia is painful for the many committed staff of that agency whose mission is to care for people in the community in need of government support. Services Australia, through Centrelink, child support and Medicare, intersects with every Australian at some stage of their lives. From birth to retirement to the myriad life events in between, Service Australia is there. In the 12-month period of the last financial year, agency workers administered $240 billion in payments, handled 1.1 billion transactions online, had 10.7 million face-to-face contacts, and took 53.9 million calls through the biggest call centre network in the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. There was a strong show of support for the agency's work in the 24-25 budget with a record investment of $2.8 billion. This is the single largest announced increase in dollar terms and extra staff in the history of Services Australia. This investment is allowing me to achieve my goals that I had for the agency when I had the privilege of becoming the Minister. My first goal was to secure more service delivery staff to undo the damage the previous government had done by slashing the workforce. In this last year, we've recruited an extra 3,000 ongoing frontline staff who are now onboarded and fully trained. This has been pivotal to my second goal of tackling the claims backlog and the call wait times. Centrelink calls are now answered around 6 minutes faster on average, Medicare calls almost 10 minutes faster, and that will again improve after this tax time peak. Claims processing has improved exponentially since the last financial year. This is the real world that people depend upon. Paid parental leave is down from 25 days to 4, 84% improvement. Job seeker, 22 days to 5, 77% improvement. Childcare subsidy, 24 days to 7, 71% improvement. My third goal was to improve the safety for staff and members using the 318 service centres. We now have funding for more security staff, better security features at all our service centres, and at last a centralised security operations centre. The Albanese government has also passed an amendment to the Criminal Code for harsher penalties for anyone who harms or threatens Commonwealth frontline workers. So I'm pleased to have hit my goals for proper resourcing, reducing call waiting times in the claims backlog, improving staff morale and safety, and securing funding to improve our digital capabilities. Services Australia has been a source of innovation, especially under David's leadership. Passkeys are a good example of agency innovation that has made Australia a global pioneer in improving security of online services. Now, there's global leaders like Google and Microsoft and Sony already give users the option of replacing passwords with passkeys. Instead, using your face or your fingerprint as your password to sign into websites and apps. Unlike passwords, passkeys are resistant to phishing and scammers, and you don't need a good memory. But, as they say, the future is digital. Some of the most significant budget announcements were the investments in digital ID and MyGov. This reflects the need to reduce the data stored and shared by increasing use of digital ID, and answers the MyGov audit calls for the platform to be funded on an ongoing basis as nationally critical infrastructure. I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Audit Chair, David Thodey, who couldn't be here today. MyGov is the largest online platform in the country, with 5.6 million people now using the MyGov app. But at the moment, its potential is underutilised. Australians, we have a Ferrari in the garage, but we only take it out to do the grocery shopping. I want to change that, because MyGov is the gateway to Australia's digital future. A secure, inclusive, exciting digital future. Today, I unveil a project that we have in development that we call the Trust Exchange, or TEX. I'm collaborating on this project with my colleagues, Senator Katie Galley, the Minister for Finance, who has carriage of digital ID, and the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for the ATO, Stephen Jones. TEX will not duplicate digital ID, but builds upon investments already made in that system, including all the consultation and the digital ID infrastructure. TEX will use MyGov and MyGov ID to make the sharing of personal information more secure and trustworthy. The difference between MyGov and MyGov ID is simply MyGov ID, owned by the ATO, does just one thing. It proves your identity to both government and business. On the other hand, MyGov, owned by Service Australia, is a place where you can use your MyGov ID to conduct up to 16 federal government services online, and we will keep adding more. The strength of this tech trifecta has the potential to give Australians control of their data that will rival what I think is the gold standard for citizens' rights digitally, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, but without the European regulation and complexity. We're opting for the carrot over the stick because individuals, business and government all win from this. And where most other jurisdictions have a centralised ID with a number from birth, we're embarking on the first decentralised model, which provides more privacy and security features. Now, I get that in entering the digital world, we have to grasp new language and concepts. Think back to when we first heard about the cloud. TEX is something brand new and world-leading. It is not a wallet, nor an app, nor ID, but rather it is a secure means by which to exchange with a third party who you are, your identity, and what you can do, your credentials. Service Australia is partnering with other government systems to develop TEX, to give Australians the ability to verify their identity and credentials based on official information already held by the Australian government. I want to stress that TEX is currently in the proof of concept stage. We have an $11.4 million Commonwealth investment in the build-out as part of the Digital ID project. So between now and December, TEX will establish the ability to issue a verified credential, the ability to selectively share information, and the ability to prove your identity without sharing information. Over the next few months, we will add Medicare, DVA, organ donor and concession cards. By January 2025, the proof of concept will be complete, and we'll assess what our options are for pilots. This new digital infrastructure can drive progress that lets individuals control their own data, while creating opportunities for productivity gains and economic progress. Here's how it could work, and I'll use the MyGov wallet to illustrate. 1, you need a service. Say you're booking a hotel room, as an example. 2, when you check in, the hotel requests your personal information, your attributes. That could often be a driver's licence or passport. 3, with TEX, instead of handing over those documents to be copied in some form, stored goodness knows where, you would scan a QR code on the front desk or use technology similar to tap-to-pay machine that digitally shakes hands with your MyGov wallet. So 4, you choose only the information you wish to share with a hotel from your digital wallet and you consent to its use. 5, you will have a record in your MyGov wallet of what you shared and with whom you shared it. You know, talking about this in the media this morning, someone reached out to my office and said, could we please expedite that for his Airbnb? So, and I'm using his words, they're not handing over sensitive information to some rando. That is a good point, because the Trust Exchange will deliver 3 benefits: choice, consent and trust. Choice, you choose what information is shared and with whom it is shared. 2, consent, you deliberately consent to every bit of the information that you share. 3, trust. The information shared is trusted because the system imposes rigorous privacy and security standards to validate its authenticity. And as I said, there may be instances where TEX can verify your identity without any information being exchanged at all. Take the case of someone going to one of the local club's ACT venues and wanting to prove that they're 18 and over. The plan with TEX is that they would just hold their phone to a tap-to-pay style machine and a digital token will be sent to the club vouching for their identity that they're 18 or over. Not even their actual age is disclosed, merely that they're over 18. So this token will be a valuable, reliable promise to the club, but of zero value to a cyber criminal, because the confirmation token will not contain any personal information. All that's been exchanged is a digital thumbs up from the government that you are who you say you are. And text can have a range of uses. Government to business, business to government, consumer to government and government to consumer, and from consumer to business and business to consumer. Whatever the case, online or in person, you choose what is shared, you consent to what is being shared, and you can trust that it is shared safely. The beauty of text is that it's part of a broader interoperable digital ID system. It means reducing the collection, storage and sharing of data across the economy. We know there have been a number of high-profile, significant cyber incidents and data breaches in recent times. The Optus incident, one of the first on a large scale, showed why we have to do things differently. And we know from that incident, many businesses store government-produced documents as licences and passports as a way of proving they know their customers. An ID as a verifiable credential will be a secure and very efficient way for a business to be certain of someone's ID. It can save businesses money as it significantly reduces their customer onboarding procedures and their data storage requirements. As we see the results of the text proof of concept, I'll work with ministerial colleagues to consider how we might be able to update regulation to take advantage of this advancement. Every time a breach happens, it harms Australians' confidence in digital technologies. And given the importance of digital technologies in improving people's lives, it's important that the Australian government helps to build trust. You know, as the digital age arrived, to be fair, business saw data accumulation as an asset. Now they are learning, we're learning, data accumulation can also be a liability. We've heard that data is the new oil, and there's no doubt used responsibly and safety, it can be that liquid gold. But herein lies a Promethean challenge. Prometheus, as you may know, tricked the Olympian gods. He stole fire and gave to humanity in the form of knowledge. Now, the king of the Olympian god, Zeus, condemned Prometheus to eternal torment for this transgression. Today, Prometheus is now not only associated with the quest for knowledge, but a symbol for unintended consequences. Data like fire, in itself, is neither good nor bad, but its custodianship can have unintended consequences. With text, data will be secure. Text will be time-saving, it'll be money-saving. It's a decentralised model which reduces the replication of information and has privacy by design at its foundation. If we let private industry carry out the business needing to store less and less personal information, then through a different mechanism, we've actually achieved some of the best policy goals of the GDPR. I think business is keen, and to be clear, text will be an opt-in system. I suspect people will vote with their feet once they have an option, and they'll choose businesses that offer them the convenience of control and security of text. I'm pleased to advise that Telstra and Google have welcomed the opportunity to be involved in the development of this important step towards our digital future. And the Tech Council of Australia, the Commonwealth Bank and employment platform SEEK have all given in-principle support for text. CBA described text as the public digital infrastructure private industry needs. SEEK Managing Director Ian Narev said the expansion plans for digital credentials will, and I quote, make a big difference to the effectiveness of our labour markets, helping job seekers and businesses of all sides. Consent, choice, trust. I know it's still a bit of an abstract concept at this point, but once it's in place, text will have countless exciting applications. It's the potential to supercharge innovation across our economy, creating opportunities in all sectors, as well as for small businesses who don't want to be burdened with having to keep and collect data they don't need. With the work currently being done, MyGov users will be able to add more cards and certificates to the MyGov wallet, including from state government and in time private industry. I'm working with colleagues and states to facilitate storage of licences and cards in MyGov and in state digital wallets. We're getting moving on this, and it's on track to happen by the end of 2024. Equally, I want the Medicare card and Commonwealth concession cards to be included in state-based wallets. Trade certificates will also soon be available in your MyGov wallet. I'd initially hoped to do a swap of credentials between individual states and federal apps, but I think the technology has now moved on, and this provides a better solution than what would have essentially just been a picture of a card. Text will achieve the outcome of the card swap and much more. What we won't do, though, like some of my predecessor governments, is throw good money after bad, chasing broken solutions like the failed entitlement calculation engine. So if we see that we need to make changes, we will. What we want to do is make life easier, allow your credentials to be at your fingertips and keep your personal information safer. There's no question that we have to make advances in digital infrastructure. You know, we know that when tech works, Aussies are fast adopters and they love the convenience of online. More and more we do our banking and shopping online, we order our food, we ride share, we pay for parking, we book appointments, we do our tax online. And we'd prefer to organise our government services online. Research by tech think tank Mandela showed that 90% of Australians surveyed prefer to interact with the government on a digital platform. In aggregate, it means millions of hours' time saved to the end of this decade. As one Australian put pithily, they just want us to make it as easy as Amazon. Of course, we can never promise that every government service transaction is that straightforward. Government services have to deliver for all Australians to enhance trust, with reliability, capability, integrity and, of course, compassion. Understanding someone's eligibility for the disability support pension can't be reduced to something as uncomplicated as ordering from Amazon. But we should always be trying to make convenience and ease as an ambition in any service. Research on the New Zealand government services found that if filling out a form is too hard, people will walk away often with a feeling that government's deliberately making it hard for them to claim their entitlements. Or in other words, accessing government services should not make citizens feel stupid or stressed. Senator Katie Gallagher and I announced last week a survey of the development of online and face-to-face government services. Responses will inform a report on the future of government services being overseen by the PM's department. We want to hear a diverse range of opinions and experience so we can make sure that government services are more inclusive, so we can get it right at every step of our digital future. And to get it right, we need to bring a lot of people to the table. We're going to look at the risks and benefits of every policy, program, platform that we implement from every angle. I recently held a round table with the Tech Council of Australia. We were joined by reps from the tech sector, industry, academia, civil society. Jenny Miller and Kath Madrick were good enough to come along. The message reiterated around the table was that the digital offerings have to be two things: useful and easy. Leanne Ho, the former Chief Executive of Economic Justice Australia, reminded the gathering that while we must design for the customer experience, we must ensure that the underlying policy intent is being delivered upon. To differentiate between what is an optional add-on, a nice to have, and what is a service that allows people to put food on their table for their kids. A salient reminder that one person's hierarchy of needs is not necessarily the same as the next Australian. Inclusion is the key. The constituency for government services is huge. Anyone who uses child support or Medicare or Centrelink, that's everyone. But government services is decidedly, I have to say, politically unsexy. Interestingly, though, in the United States, the Government Service Delivery Improvement Act is currently before Congress. It's setting the directive for the Office of Management and Budget to designate a senior official with the primary responsibility to coordinate efforts to improve government service delivery. That has its merits. But how do we get Australia excited about moving to online government services? How do we make online government services as desirable as an Apple product that people queue around the block to see? We have the tech already to go digital. We know there is demand for it. We have a history in this country of being early adopters. So if we have all of these factors, then you have to assume the problem that stands in our way is political. I've spent my time in politics trying to make change that makes life better, more equitable, more inclusive and simpler for Aussies. In that time, it is clear that the cornerstone of change is that every citizen can see themselves in the future as a result of that change. Now, I actually think there's common ground between the coalition and the government. In saying that, I read a recent speech to the Australian Information Industry Association by Shadow Minister for Government Services and the Digital Economy. Now, to be fair, Mr Fletcher did refer to me 16 times, perhaps not as flatteringly as I'd have liked, but you can't have everything. But I will mention him once here today to say that I agree with him on some of the key points, other than his references to me. They include, 1, using data responsibly to provide personalised services, including the increased use of tools such as single-touch payroll. We agree. And the Labor government has supercharged the use of single-touch payroll to ensure better payment accuracy and reduce instances of mistakes. 2, consider the rollout of voice print, digital assistants, digital identity and video chat appointments. Agree. We do this and constantly ensure the most up-to-date patches and upgrades to those technologies are employed. 3, trial Microsoft's Copilot AI tool. Tick, but we'll do it in a considered and managed way. 4, follow the impressive work of the former New South Wales coalition government established in the Service New South Wales under the leadership of Minister Victor Dominello. Could not agree more. To quote the old ad, I liked Victor so much I persuaded him to come and work with me on our advisory board, and he's here today with other board members. 5, data and digital ministers meeting to improve coordination with state and territory governments. We agree. We have continued this to oversee the integrated delivery of government service between tiers of government. So we want to work with the coalition. I also want to make some observations about that last point about working with different governments. A coordinated approach across government builds trust in the community. I'll be blunt, I think the biggest barrier I've encountered in Australia to having the convenience of seamless government services is what I would refer to as a plague of fiefdoms. The siloed thinking across departments and agencies has to stop. Not everyone needs their own app. Not everyone needs their own processes. One door is better than many doors. I can recall reading years ago about a futurist who visited Australia, and he lamented what he called a clay layer in some public service departments. Upper management who were not digital natives and refused to learn, stunting the digital uptake of the whole organisation. Now, the notion of relinquishing control in the public sector, I think, is the new clay layer. And yes, I acknowledge there are legislative obstacles in some circumstances, but turf protecting prevents Australians from reaping the benefits of a collaborative culture. Organisations under Services Australia are showing what Tell Us Once can look like through a pilot for the birth of a child here in the ACT with the local government. The trial starts with the details the parent provides at the hospital to register their baby for federal government services. It means quick access to critical health services, including enrolling the baby in Medicare, the Medicare safety net, My Health Record, the Australian Immunisation Register, and confirming the birth of the baby for the purposes of Centrelink family assistance claims. Tell Us Once, get the information, and life is more seamless. We need other departments and agencies to come on board so we can offer the Tell Us Once experience across key events in people's life journeys. The benefits are life-changing. Think of a woman fleeing domestic violence. With Tell Us Once, all she would need would be their phone to be curated and to get the curated and ready-to-use assistance. Through her phone, she could prove who she is, connect her with a dedicated social worker, commence a crisis payment, find crisis accommodation, and if she chooses to apply for an AVO, be connected with the law enforcement to commence the process. That's what connected agencies and services can do. They can make lives easier in the very best of times or the very worst of times. I do briefly want to touch on the topic of AI. This is an area where people-focused implementation is a non-negotiable. We have to embrace AI, but we need to look beyond the current hype on generative AI to more fundamental and structured AI, which can be used to look for efficiencies in the back-of-house processes, searching for information so staff can use their time on higher value tasks. As one poster on social media said, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so I can do art and reading. Not for my AI to do my art and reading so I can do my laundry and dishes. The proper use of AI depends on its intent. Its safe application relies on clear ethical guidelines. It's about how we harness AI to give humans back the things that they haven't been able to replicate. Time. It's about keeping the human decision-making at the heart of human services. In conclusion, we know, you know, that people might chat to their local Member of Parliament at a community event or the school fete once or twice a year. They might catch a bit of news, in the media if they've got nothing else in the evening routine. They might watch a short clip on the train on their way to work. For a lot of Australians, their contact with politics is fleeting. But their contact with government through human services, that's a fundamental part of daily life. Government services are the system. So investing in services that are better, more reliable, easier to use is not just about convenience and competence. It's fundamentally about our confidence in our democracy and its capacity to deliver for the people, to meet the obligations of a decent society. I feel that one of our biggest problems sometimes in politics is that we lack ambition and imagination for our policy making and our government services. But we should imagine, because in imagining we set goals to aspire to, not the next foot in front of the previous foot, but the horizon. Imagine if we agreed the sole focus of government departments was to make life easier for the community they serve. If we were less worried about whether the department we work for is getting maximum credit or about our personal career gains and more concerned about being innovative and responsive. You no longer have to imagine Service Australia being funded appropriately. The Albanese government's done that, and the results are beginning to speak for themselves. But imagine if government service delivery was beyond politics, and that even if political parties changed, the standards that we maintain remain in perpetuity. Imagine a new social pillar of which we can be all proud. A successful digital future will only be forged in partnership with the community. I'm reminded of a perhaps not so famous French Prime Minister who wrote at the time of the 1848 revolution in France. His name was Alexandre Auguste Ledru-Rollin. He said, I'll give you the English version, "There go the people. I must follow them, for I am their leader." Imagine if we practiced radical trust in the people, the consumers of government services, and we listen to them about what they need and how they want to access it. In return, we may be rewarded with the radical trust from the community necessary to fulfil our ambitions of an easy, useful, simple, safe, seamless digital future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shorten, for those remarks. And also, I'd like to back you up on thanking the families of those robo-debt victims for joining us here today, putting a human face on the issue of government services. So thank you for being here. Look, the first question I've got before we go to questions from the journalists, other journalists here, is about your mention of the European standard here. There is this very, very strong European regulation, the data protection regulation, that is basically mandatory. It has privacy protections on how all this kind of information is stored and used. So my question for you about your approach here is, are you looking at a legislative or changing the law basically to help set up the system that you've got in mind? Will there be privacy protections? Because that's a source of great concern in the community generally now about where data is stored. And why not make it compulsory?
Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney-General, has been leading the work in terms of our privacy legal framework. So we've had an inquiry. I know that AG's department and the Attorney-General are considering their options, so I won't preempt what he does there. What I want to put to you, though, is that and the GDPR is important, and I think Australian businesses dealing with Europe, it's impossible to avoid the standards there anyway. What I like about talking about the exchange is I want us to recognise we can do government services better, and that government can be at the centre of innovation. People just want stuff that's useful and eases them with time, but just people want stuff that works and doesn't stress them out. So, you know, the privacy approach, important issue. The AG is looking at that. I think, though, that one of the tests we are applying to what we do is, can it be trusted? Can people have control? Can people have consent? And so I think we're ticking the values of the GDPR, but we're not necessarily rolling out the full legal framework of that. And to the extent we can have verifiable ID that business can rely on and business to consumer, I think our approach is pretty neat.
Okay, the next question is from Sarah Eisen.
Sarah Eisen from The Australian. Thank you, Minister, for your address. Just to move to your other portfolio of the NDIS, the states are saying that they don't have any clarity or transparency when it comes to what's going on, particularly regarding foundational supports. Rockcliffe has obviously said there are too many risks in terms of the costs to the state. Premier Malinauskas has said there's a decided lack of detail about all of this. Can you end this criticism now and tell us what you think the states are going to be up for? And is the work with the states on the NDIS and the separate foundational support system, is that beginning to fall apart?
When you say, can I end the criticism, I'm not running for Premier, so I can't end what they say. But I don't think they're right. I think they're entirely right. But I can say we are having fruitful negotiations. It was very good of Premier Malinauskas and Premier Rockcliffe to come and visit me in Moonee Ponds. They got great coffee. And we discussed through the issues. So I congratulate both of them for their willingness on behalf of all the premiers to engage meaningfully. There are negotiations underway as we speak, and you know, I'm a cup quarter full, half full, three-quarter full, overflowing sort of guy. So until the legislation's passed, I will do everything I can to make the states feel they can support it, which they don't at this point. So I'll give it my best shot. So it's a work in progress. In terms of foundational supports, the NDIS was never intended to be the only lifeboat in the ocean. The reality is that too often, it's not just the states, by the way, and the states do good things for people with disabilities, but a hospital might say in an outpatient's ward, if you're on the NDIS, go and see them. They might say, Medicare might say, if you want a CPAC machine, go to the NDIS if you're on the NDIS. We have a situation in our schools where kids on the NDIS, their parents bring in the private OT or occupational therapist or speech pathologist into classes. Like, what's the school's role here to help look after kids and include them? So that's why I don't quite agree with the states. Bruce Bonahady, Lisa Paul, everyone did a great review. They said we need to build an ecosystem of disability supports outside the NDIS, so it's not the NDIS or nothing. We will keep working on that. Amanda Isher's doing a great job with the states, starting to flesh out design. We put hundreds of millions of dollars into the design process. We're talking to the sector. So the state's fundamental fear is that somehow they're going to get lumped with everyone on the NDIS, or many people. It's not right. We'll try and negotiate with the states in our because our legislation is necessary. Our legislation will, I think, decrease the cost curve, which is great, and I think it'll tighten up things which need tightening up.
Just to follow up on that issue, you've got changes to the NDIS which are before Parliament at the moment. And the caucus appears to have been briefed today on the fact that there are some changes to that bill, including, I think, clarifying the rules about sexual services, for instance, that can be funded.
Yep.
Does that mean that you're close to an agreement with the coalition on getting that NDIS bill through?
Yeah, listen, it would be fair to say I was a bit grumpy with them taking an extra 8 weeks of their senators to look at matters, because they'd had 12 weeks. But what is done is done. Marielle Smith, the South Australian Labor Senator, chairs the Community Affairs Committee. They came back with a very good report. It had one recommendation, though, after 8 weeks. It said, please pass the bill. Thank you. Yeah, I'm having constructive discussions with the coalition. They've made suggested amendments. We're considering them carefully. I think some of them, even if we don't particularly like them, you know, politics is the art of the possible, and so we're working constructively with the coalition. The vote hasn't happened yet, so I don't want to jinx myself. But the short answer to both your questions is we're talking pretty animatedly with the states at the moment, and we're talking very constructively with not just the coalition, but with crossbenchers. The Greens, I don't know where they are.
Thanks. The next question is from...
If I could just clarify just one part of the question, I'm so sorry. You said that the states don't feel they support it at this point. You will do everything you can to make the states feel they can support it. They don't support it at this point. Is that all the states don't support this, or is that just the couple of states that visited you?
I don't want to show too much of the kimono in our state-federal negotiations. I won't lift that up too much yet. But I congratulate Premier Malinauskas and Premier Rockcliffe for coming to Moonee Ponds to talk to me about the best interests of Australians with disability.
The next question is from Dana Daniel.
I've never worn a kimono, by the way, just in case that was the next question. Sorry.
Dana Daniel from the Canberra Times. Thank you for your speech, Minister. I have another question about negotiations with the states and territories. Is it a situation where you just need to rip the Band-Aid off to sort of force the jurisdictions into filling those gaps? And is the government prepared to increase funding to hospitals, public PHNs and schools in exchange for them providing support that will no longer be available on the NDIS?
Jason Clare, the Minister for Education's negotiation with the schools is Jason's prerogative to update you on, but I know he is working very hard. I know that both the Northern Territory and another jurisdiction have embraced what the feds are offering. I'm confident that Mark Butler and the health ministers will work through a system which is to the benefit of the state hospital system. I'm confident that Jason Clare, as Education Minister, will work through with the Education Ministers to tackle improvements in funding. When you say rip off the Band-Aid, your Chief Minister here, Andrew Barr, and your Disability Minister, Rachel, they're doing a great job. I actually think the ACT, when the NDIS was formed, the ACT still kept its hand in disability in a way perhaps not every jurisdiction did. So, you know, if I can try and meet them halfway, I will. We are determined to reform the scheme. We get one chance at this. This is a sliding door moment of politics. The Liberals couldn't convince people to do it. The disability sector is anxious about any talk of change. They have muscle memory. Whatever the imperfections of the NDIS, and you know, I read your paper, so I get to find out. Sometimes you ring me first to tell me about them. But whatever the imperfections, it's changing the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. You know, I'm going to be this bold. When I had the opportunity to go to the United Nations leading the Australian delegation to update, as every country does who's signatory to the Convention on Rights of People with Disability, no country makes the level of per capita investment in disability that we do. And that's a good thing. But I want this scheme to be here in the future. So going to this issue of ripping off the Band-Aid, I will do just about everything to try and convince the states to like what we're doing, and I'll compromise and see. They want to make sure that they still are co-governors of the scheme. So I'll you know, walk a long way to try and bring them on board. But at the end of the day, people with disability are more important than any particular level of government. So if we have to rip the Band-Aid off, we will. But, you know, I haven't given up on working with the ACT, and they've got a good jurisdiction here for disability comparatively.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is from Anthony Galloway.
Thank you, Anthony Galloway from Capital Brief. You mentioned before that the Liberals couldn't convince anyone to do it. In her second reading speech on the NDIS reform legislation, Linda Reynolds put the blame squarely on you for their inability to convince anyone to do it. She said he cruelly promised everyone on the NDIS and their families that there would be no cuts. He perpetuated the fraud and the fiction that this was a scheme that did not need reform. Does she not have a point? In opposition, didn't you massively understate the issue of the spiralling cost of the scheme?
Let's work back from the end of that. I had no idea how crap the Liberals were running the NDIS. Sorry, you could have, you know, I thought they had, what, seven ministers in 9 years? The Liberals view the NDIS as the punishment battalion portfolio or the departure lounge. And the problem is that, yes, they built the scheme up, and I acknowledge that. And I think a lot of individual ministers personally have a commitment to people with disability. So Linda Reynolds is not a bad person per se, but they allowed a payment system which was the Wild West. When the Libs were in charge, and I didn't know this till we get in, if you put in an invoice into the scheme between 5 and 6:30 on a weekday, it would never be checked, you just get paid. Mind you, if you put it in between 9 and 5, only 20 of them would get checked. Like, there wasn't a scheme. They allowed a sector to grow of unregistered providers to the extent that 90% of all providers are unregistered. We don't even know who we're paying. Like, if Linda thinks that's a record to be proud of, wowza. And yeah, her approach was just to use a functional impairment assessment category, which takes no account of people's needs. I mean, you use their functional independent assessment, a half-an-hour tick and flick interview or 1 hour interview with a person. That doesn't get to the bottom of who they are. That was her reform. And the other thing is, you can do a functional assessment of a person, but the care that they need personally might vary if their ageing parent carers no longer can look after them. So they had blunt force trauma to deal with. It wasn't a very good idea. And I think also Linda is like, I don't want her to sue me, but I just, she got a lot of legacy issues she's trying to sort out at the moment. So that contribution in that second reading speech was about standard for what I've come to expect from her.
Would the cost of the NDIS be lower now if independent assessments had been brought in at that time under the coalition?
Oh, you mean if we'd gone from the motor car back to the horse, what would be emissions? Whatever. It's not going to happen. Let's see. Their proposal was ill-formed. It would just lead to turmoil, conflict. Like, driving a car, replace it. It was the wrong reform, and they didn't convince people. And we will convince people. And whatever some Liberals unhappily might say about how life's treated them unfairly, get over it and move on. We've got a good set of reforms here which I think are better framed, with more consultation with people with disability. We did a 12-month review. On registration, we've done another 6-month review. Some of you would say we're taking too long to do it, and others are saying we're going too fast, and the Liberals are saying it should have been them. Whatever. I just care about people with disability.
Next question is from Claudia Long.
Minister, thank you very much for your address. When the government responded to the Disability Royal Commission a few weeks ago, Marika Jonkers from People with Disability Australia said that she was devastated and disappointed. Elle Gibbs from Disability Advocacy Network Australia said pretty much the same thing, and that the response from the government is nowhere near the scale needed to deal with the widespread mistreatment of disabled people. Sky Kokoschki-Moore from Children and Young People with Disabilities Australia called the government's response a betrayal of young people with disability. Given that devastation comes from 13 recommendations being accepted in full and 117 in principle, what is the timeline for actually following these things through? This is a community that you work with very closely. When can people actually have some certainty about whether any of this is actually going to happen?
Well, first of all, it was Labor who called for the Disability Royal Commission. I remember because I was leader, and Jenny Macklin and I called it in a reservoir backyard of a person with disability, their advocate, so I know exactly when it was first called for. The Libs initially, Malcolm said we don't need this Royal Commission. Instead, he set up the Quality and Safeguards Commission, which then was underfunded. It was great that we've got Michael Fielder here doing great work, and we've doubled his funding, and thanks for being the temporary head of that body, Michael. So they set up a safeguards mechanism at the beginning of 2018, which was underfunded to a ridiculous extent. We fixed that. But eventually, Scott Morrison decided that they didn't want to be beaten up about this Royal Commission after their amazingly stupid defence of the banks for 3 years. So their muscle memory is, let's have a Disability Royal Commission. The Disability Royal Commission is incredibly important. It went for 4 years, cost $600 million. There were a lot of stories told, a lot of trauma. There were 15 volumes. My colleague Amanda Rishworth was given the very difficult task of coordinating across 16 federal agencies and then our friends at the states. So yeah, I understand that people wanted everything answered straight away. So I can understand that frustration. On the other hand, in my areas of the NDIS, there were about 60-odd recommendations. Maybe 45 plus were to do with the Quality and Safeguards Commission, and maybe 15 or 16 with the NDIA. We're implementing most of those recommendations now. So the timetable is not quite as dire as I think some of the advocates say, but they're entitled to their opinion. The Royal Commission also, let me remind you, did split on some fundamental issues. Like there were 6 Royal Commissioners, and they split. And each side had a point of view. They split on 3 big issues. And I think this is where some in the sector wanted us to go harder one way than we have. The 3 issues they split on were employment, group homes and education. There is a very legitimate debate where some people say that, and advocates say, that having special schools is educational segregation, and they want to end the segregation. But when that recommendation came out, there are thousands of special needs educators and tens of thousands of families for whom mainstream education is not currently a choice because their kids get bullied and picked on. I know families, friends of mine, where their son gets beaten up at school because he has autism. No one wants, they're trying the mainstream path. So I think that where the sector, the government, the states and families can go is ultimately, they gave 25 years for that to be resolved. Group homes, I think 11, or I can't quite remember all the numbers, separate workplaces, a different time period. I think where we go on all of that is identify what we agree on. We agree that we should have more inclusive education in our mainstream schools. Let's get that right so parents have a choice. We agree that we want to lift the wages of people on supported employment, but let's get companies employing more people with disabilities in open employment. We agree we don't want large group homes, but we've got to make sure that our supported independent living packages are working. So yeah, I get the disappointment. On the other hand, no government in the history of federation has invested as much as we do, but also tried to consult as much as we do. We have 23 different design groups, co-design groups in the NDIA. Half of the board of the NDIA is now people with lived experience and disability. The chair is Kurt Fernley. 2 of the 7 top reports in the NDIA now are people with disabilities. We'll have more exciting announcements to make about the work we're doing in the Quality and Safeguards Commission. 17% of the people who work at the NDIA now are people who self-report with disabilities. Service Australia has 6% approximately of its staff people with disabilities. So I understand the advocates should be pushing for as much as they can get, as quickly as they can get. The part I don't quite accept, this is not a disinterested government with its shoes up on the desk saying, not my problem. You know how passionate we are, and I think one of the early down payments on Royal Commission reform will be the improvements we make to the NDIS. Thank you.
Just on the wages, though, because you mentioned that the government supports those, given that they're currently set at a minimum of $6 an hour, why not just ask the Fair Work Commission to put them up?
Well, we've had business. OK, there's about 20,000 people who get supported employment. Again, it's some of a minister's portfolio, so I don't want to stray too much into it. We have seen moves to improve the wages by successive governments, to be fair. Also, everyone on a supported wage does receive the DSP. That's not means tested, self-evidently. A lot of the supported employment workplaces, some of them have now moved to open employment and providing that pathway. Some were set up by families decades ago when there was just nothing. So I want to be sure that before we move to closing supported workplaces, that we've got somewhere for people to go. I don't want to send them back to daycare or to sit at home. We'll work on this collaboratively, and we should lift the rates, but we're going to work with people. We're not just going to drop stuff on people. Thanks, Claudia.
Next question is from Brandon Howe.
Thanks, Minister, for your speech. Brandon Howe from innovationoz.com. First of all, just wanted to ask a question about a digital platform on the NDIA. There's a Salesforce platform that's being a billing system that's being rolled out at the moment. The estimated cost of that was initially about 25 million, and that's gone up to the hundreds of millions. I was just wondering, that contract is due to end in the middle of next year. Has the government given view to the future of that system, or perhaps is there a need to test the market there? And similarly, on the trusted exchange, is that expected to be fully developed in-house, or would someone like Google or Telstra be looking to develop that work?
On the Salesforce contract, that'll be up to the NDIA. The last thing this minister wants to do is get involved in procurement. That hasn't been such a happy experience. But, you know, I'm sure the NDIA will be talking to providers, talking to consumers, seeing how that all works. But that is definitely appropriately an agency decision. In terms of our pilots, we like to do as much as we can in-house. We're not afraid to use contractors. But, you know, Service Australia has the biggest tech workforce across government, and there's a lot of skills within there too. So we'll obviously talk to external experts, but I want techs to be a government proposition which everyone can use.
And just to clarify, the $11 million figure, is that just for the pilot stage right now?
Well, that's just for the proof of concept stage, and then we'll have to put more money in for the pilot stages. I guess pilots could be done in 3 months. I'd love to see them done in 6 months, and then we can get to a product which we can then talk. And in the pilot stage, we're in proof of concept. We've got to talk to the private sector, say, well, what are the uses you see and need? And we'll have to work. One thing we will not be doing is charging individuals for the use of techs.
Thank you.
Next question is from Tessa Conomu.
Thank you very much for your time today. I just wanted to touch on your response before in relation to the government's response to the Disability Royal Commission. 2 of the commissioners who live with a disability backed phasing out special schools, and they said that segregated education was incompatible with inclusive education. Many advocates have said that segregation leads to the exploitation and to the neglect of disabled people. Do you accept that view?
One of the commissioners that you refer to, her name's Rhonda Galbally. I've been lucky enough to know her 17 years. She's been a consistent advocate for not having separate education. But I don't necessarily accept that everyone in special schools is doing it bad. What I would say is we need to convince the states and the federal government to fund more inclusive education. But if you were just to take everyone at a special school now and take them to their local high school or primary school, you're just kidding yourself. It's not going to happen. And I think some of the debate and some of the rhetoric does underestimate the contribution of kids, but also their parents, to special needs ed, and the teachers who work in those systems. So, yeah, I accept Rhonda's got a very strong view, but I cannot see us. I see special needs education reflecting a choice for parents who just can't get their kids catered for in the mainstream system. And the question I'd love you to ask the states and education providers is, what can you do more to look after kids in the mainstream system before we just tell everyone that they're just going to turn up one day? Thanks, Jess.
Thank you. The next question is from Melissa Code.
Thanks, Minister, for your talk. Melissa Code from the Mandarin. You mentioned that Trust Exchange was at the proof of concept stage, and a recent investigation by the Commonwealth Ombudsman looking at the MyGov security and the risk of so-called unauthorised linking examined why there was a lack of coordination among agencies such as Centrelink and Medicare to assist people impacted by identity theft, fraud and data breaches. Is it your expectation that by the time Trust Exchange is a fully realised product, this issue of agency coordination will be resolved when it comes to responding to and managing risks?
Yeah, we're grateful to the Ombudsman for their report, and we've said that we'll implement their recommendations. So hopefully, but I can't put a timetable without going to check with my agency heads. I've done that in the past and they said, Minister, that can't be done in that timetable. But no, we accept we think the Ombudsman report's useful, and we think that it can provide us some direction to further upgrade our systems.
One of the responses in Services Australia's official response to the Ombuds report said it was looking at legislation that may limit its capacity to coordinate responses in this way, and it indicated that the end of December 2024 was when that research might be resolved. Is that an acceptable timeline for you?
Oh, listen, I think some of my public servants have a view that there's real time and shortened time. They're the ones laughing at me now. Yes, I've heard. But listen, I want everything done yesterday. But when my highly professional senior public servants say, we'll try and bring it forward, but we can't do it by then, I guess sometimes reality intrudes on the best of my aspirations. I would like it to be done as soon as possible, let me reassure you, but they're always telling me things take longer than I realise.
Thank you. And the next question is from Sarah Basford-Canales.
Thank you, Minister, for the speech. On the issue of trust, obviously one of the biggest deficits of trust in government in recent decades is the robo-debt scheme. You've previously said the sealed section of the Robo-Debt Royal Commission can't stay sealed forever, and that after the appropriate investigations are finalised, that could potentially be unsealed. We've obviously seen the National Anti-Corruption Commission discontinue 5 investigations into 5 of its referrals. One of them isn't being investigated by the Public Service Commission. We've also seen the AFP discontinue one of its known investigations. If the public can't get robo-justice, as you've put it before, do you think the public, and especially the victims of the illegal scheme, should get robo-transparency by unsealing that chapter?
I don't buy that we haven't had robo-justice, Sarah. We helped organise the class action, which saw the payments. I mean, that doesn't compensate people what they've gone through, but it's $1.8 billion better than it was before. I think it's a permanent entry on the Wikipedias of all of those ministers who are involved. They'll carry that for all time. I think that we've learned new processes as a result, and we've been responding to the Royal Commission's recommendations. You can never get true justice because it should never have happened. It was unlawful. Having said that, also, Minister Gallagher in the Senate and myself in the House of Reps, I'll be moving this tomorrow, a public service amendment bill. One of the flaws that's been emerged out of following up from the Robo-Debt Royal Commission and accountability is that the Australian Public Service Commissioner doesn't have an express power to investigate former agency heads for alleged breaches of the code. The APS Commissioner was close to finalising investigations into former agency heads. It's become clear in our robo-debt inquiries that it's been claimed by others that we don't have the power to look at former agency heads. So we're responding swiftly. There'll be legislation in the House tomorrow. It's been endorsed by our caucus today at 10:30 that we will put legislation in which will make it clear that the APSC, the Australian Public Service Commissioner, has the express power to investigate the activities of former agency heads. So that will be another step towards accountability.
Just on the specific question of the sealed chapter, do you agree it should stay sealed?
I haven't won that argument yet.
You will continue to...
Pardon?
You'll continue to work for it
I'm an
within government?
indefatigable optimist, but listen, I think the Royal Commissioner did a great job. She sealed it.
Sorry, you want to unseal it?
So, I don't have that power. So, anyway, I'll just try and use whatever powers of persuasion. But I think this legislation that we've got, proposed by Minister Gallagher and the Public Service Commissioner, that's a pretty interesting development, and it's a new development.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Eva from SBS. I'm sorry, Eva, we haven't met and I can't pronounce your last name, so I'll leave that to you.
That's right. Thank you, Minister, for the talk. It's Eva Sashevska from SBS News. Minister, you had a big vision for the NDIS. Given the budget blowouts, pressure on the system, the cuts that you've had to make, what part of your initial ambition will never become a reality?
Oh, I think the NDIS is remarkable. We do need to curb its growth, but we're not cutting the scheme per se. We're a country who's running a personalised budget support system, an individualised personal budget system for 661,000 people with profound and severe disabilities. I cannot believe how far we've come. Yes, I think some money is being wasted. Yes, I think there are some service providers having a lend of it. Yes, we do need to be clear about what you can spend money on. Yes, we do need to build up a system outside the scheme. But I'm quite amazed by the NDIS nonetheless. And I know the difference it's making in the lives of so many different people. The NDIS to me is an example. In a time when we think life's too hard and that the policy system and the parliamentary process is broken, we didn't have an NDIS 11 years ago. Some might say it's too big or it's this or that. I just say it's universal. If any of us or someone we love has a profound or severe disability, this country has become smart enough to provide a personal budget of support so they can have a fulfilling life. So to be honest, my vision for the NDIS is that it's there for the future. And that's what's motivating me, because I know how much good it's actually doing. Thank you.
Minister.
Thanks. Next question from Nick Stewart.
You talked about the great record of Services Australia in employing people with disability. How about other government departments? What are you doing to actually encourage them or agitate to get them doing the same thing? And on the budget issues, we've had the great result for payment for aged care workers, but a lot of disability organisations are beginning to think, well, how long will it be before this flows on to disability support workers who are also wanting more money?
I'll be brief, but I'll be to the point. I'm an industrial relations tragic. I'm interested in how work is organised, how people get remunerated, how businesses are productive. In 2012, when I was IR Minister, the award which covers disability workers was the first award to have a gender equity pay rise. It was 22%. And it was phased in over 8 years. Remarkable. So aged care is catching up to where disability already was. That's my point. Secondly, since Labor's come in, the wages for disability carers, support workers, has moved about 15%. I think people are worth it. We do have a challenge for providers in that the price guide for the NDIS almost pays on a commodity of labour. So it pays $73 for a disability support worker, 3 roughly. And you could be fresh out of uni and just call yourself a disability worker, or you could run a long-standing not-for-profit where you've got overheads. So what we need to do is pay for quality, and that's something which the current board of the NDI is looking at, because I do get that there's some service providers under a fair bit of pressure at the moment, and we need to nuance our payment system to reward quality and outcomes as opposed to just inputs of labour.
Thank you.
And other government departments?
Listen, the APSC has a committee. I'm the minister for my area. All I can do is lead by example. But I know other departments are working on this. But yeah, I think it's a conversation which is for the APSC, the Australian Public Service Commission. I know they are thinking about it. And I know that secretaries talk about this and are champions of it. I guess diligent reporting of outcomes will also help keep accountability, won't it?
Thanks. And we've been running pretty well on time. And our last question now is from Alex Brooks.
I'm your 13th and lucky last questioner. Thank you for your address, Minister.
Thank you.
Why should people adopt this Trust Exchange ID solution when successive Australian governments have allowed Australian banks to steal hardworking Australians' money through MyGov, Australian Tax Office and other cyber fraud hacks and scams at the rate of $5,200 a minute during 2023.
Without knowing all the sources upon which you rely to make that question, I think your question answers itself. Because we need a tax, don't we?
Yep.
This would help improve, what did we say, trust and choice, and would improve consent. So in fact, without being able to go to every number you quoted, I think tax is a good idea, and you've just given another good reason to do it.
So the numbers are from ScamWatch, and just in June this year, there were 2,058 MyGov and ATO impersonation scam victims who made a report. So what safeguards will be in place to stop these IDs becoming super mule accounts that escalate Australia's fraud crime losses beyond the 312,000 that's been lost during the last hour of this broadcast?
Well, first of all, we need to go through... I mean, when MyGov was established, it was possible for multiple accounts to be opened. We've eventually got to get back to one account per person. And I know that we're putting our resources into weeding out multiple accounts, but that just takes time and resources. As you know, MyGov has multi-factor identification, but I think our passkey development will improve that. And the reality is that some people are already with data which is on the dark web. Some people will go and try and create false MyGov identities. We're trying to strengthen all of the issues against that. We do tell people constantly, don't give your bank account details to a link you receive by text. I mean, you're right, scamming's a giant issue across the whole economy. But I'm confident that MyGov and Services Australia are prioritising our cyber security in that regard.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before I ask you to thank Bill Shorten for his address today, I want to present you, Minister, with National Press Club membership. You said that you've spoken here 19 times. I think we have too many wallflowers up in Parliament House. 19 addresses here would be 19 too many for some of them. So thank you very much for speaking here. And we look forward to the 20th. Please join me in thanking Bill Shorten.